Welcome back to Life Unrehearsed. Matt Del Vecchio here, specializing in life transitions, downsizing in the senior living industry.
And I'm Corey Sirota, clinical social worker and author of Someone Died, Now What? Welcome to our new segment, as you've been hearing for the last few weeks, called Helping Moms and Dads, aka, as I would say, the sandwich generation. So I think a lot of us can relate to that. So we've been seeking out very interesting and knowledgeable guests that cover a vast array of topics that can really help families cope with the challenges of the aging process. So this week is no exception. We are going to be interviewing Matt Del Vecchio because we want to talk about, as our population ages, more and more people are downsizing and considering their senior living options. There's no question that the pandemic has put plans on hold for many people that were considering a retirement home or seniors residence. Those who were considering a move pre-pandemic have started to look again as the confidence levels build. So essentially, the stars are really aligning because there's an increased demand for the public, along with retirement homes offering spectacular incentives. So Matt, you are one of the specialists in this area. You're very familiar with the families daily navigating these kinds of options. So we do want to hear, I'm going to ask you a whole host of questions, but I also want to mention, for those of you listening, we want to hear from you. You might have a question about a retirement home or seniors residence. So please, please, please do not hesitate to text us or call with your questions. 514-790-0800 or text at 514-800. Matt, are you ready?
You're ready to go, Corey.
Ready to go. Okay, let me ask you, please define, what does senior living mean?
Yeah, there's so many different terminologies, senior living, residences, and so I'll break it up into a couple of categories. First of all, there's the 55 plus. We've seen more and more of those developments popping up, and that's essentially apartments or condos that are aimed at the 55 plus crowd. There's no healthcare services and there's very limited amenities, but it's apartment and senior living for those 55 and over. The more popular one is what we call RPAs in the industry, Résidence Privée pour Aînés. That is what we would know as a retirement home, and they could be independent living, they could be assisted living. By far in Quebec, the majority of residences are these RPAs, where they would have healthcare services. There would be a nurse on staff, 24/7 help, usually a dining room and a dépanneur and a pharmacies, tons of activities. I mean, from a social perspective, that's one of the big benefits of RPAs. And if there is care given, usually they can go up to a maximum of 3 hours per day, because that brings us to the next category, which is called long-term care. Now we're talking nursing homes. We refer to them as CHSLDs, sometimes RIs, résidence intermédiaire. So essentially, if you can no longer live at home and you need more than 3 hours of care, now we're into that last category called long-term care.
Okay. Tell us how the senior living industry has changed since the pandemic.
It's been very interesting because people have stayed home longer. Let's face it, everyone was concerned and worried about moving. RPAs, the retirement homes, they actually got looped into this category of seniors residences, which when we hear about the pandemic, it was really the CHSLDs that got affected. The RPAs, the retirement homes, did pretty good. But in general, obviously, people in the public were worried and to some extent still worried. And that turned into less people moving in over the last 2 years. Now there's more vacancies in senior living communities. But here's what I'm seeing the most, Corey. After about a year and a half, almost 2 years of staying at home, many families have reached that breaking point. Caregivers, that could be a spouse or adult children, they're getting exhausted and overwhelmed. People are going back to the office. Winter is coming, so literally in the last 3 months, we have seen tremendous amount of movement of people transitioning into retirement homes and residences.
That's the voice of Matt Del Vecchio, the owner of Lianas Senior Transition Services, and he's sharing some eye-opening trends in the senior living industry. Matt, what are some of the incentives and promotions that are available that you are seeing out there?
Yeah, it really has been interesting. Things I haven't seen before, and I'll give you just a few quick examples, and I'll just remind listeners too, Corey, that feel free to text in at 514-800. A couple texts are coming in already, or call us at 514-790-0800. We'll be glad to answer any questions concerning senior living. But what we're seeing lately, more flexible lease terms. Those that would like to sign for multi-years, 2 or 3 years, many of them are signing leases with no increases. Some are offering promotions where you get a month free in a 1-year lease. And what's quite interesting too, you may not be ready, but you might find something that you like. So you could sign a lease now and not move in for another 2 or 3 months, which is quite interesting. They're sacrificing that apartment. So that's quite an incentive that we're seeing in lease terms.
What about the appliances? Anything they're throwing in any appliances there, Matt?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. And we are seeing more and more of that, where appliances are being supplied, and fridge and stove, even washer and dryers. You'll see even stackable washer and dryers. So we're seeing more and more where appliances are being promoted, and even meal plans. Obviously all retirement homes, you have the option of taking meals or not. And what they're doing at the beginning as an incentive is, hey, try out our dining room, and why not have meals on us for a month, or here's 15 meals. So we're seeing more and more of that.
What else are you seeing?
Moving costs. There's a cost to that,
really?
and they're starting to cover costs of the downsizing and moves. Sometimes free indoor parking. That's always an issue as we approach winter. And we're seeing what's quite interesting is that more and more independent living retirement homes are offering more healthcare services. It's being demanded as we age, we require more care. So we're seeing more and more retirement homes offering care services.
That's the voice of Matt Del Vecchio, founder and owner of Lianas Senior Transition Services. He's sharing some of the very interesting trends in the senior living industry, especially post-pandemic. If you have a question, please call us at 514-790-0800 or text at 514-800. We're going to probably get to those after the break, because I have some more questions about this other things in the home itself. Actually, do they do any adjustments around the home?
Yeah, we're seeing more and more demand, particularly with mobility challenges, where the older residences might have bathtubs, and all the new builds and even a lot of the renovations and conversions are going to offering a stand-up shower option, which is obviously easier to get in and out. So we're seeing that as well.
I want to go back to the healthcare services. What kind of healthcare services could we even imagine to even ask for? Yeah, no, it's a very good question, because know that most of the time there is a nurse on staff, some what we call préposés 24/7. If you're feeling lightheaded or you're not feeling well, all of them have these either call bells or pull cords, and you can get help. And so we're seeing more and more requests for healthcare services. So that could mean as we age, maybe we need some assistance with help with dressing or bathing. I know medication management is important, particularly if there's some cognitive issues. You want to make sure you're taking your medications on time in the right quantities. If you're not doing that, then you could potentially feel lightheaded. That's how falls happen. So they're offering medication management more and more. So we're seeing that as well. So I just want to be clear, but you're seeing that in not the long-term care. Of course, it's in the long-term care, but also in the independent living. Yeah, they're getting more and more. Some of them even have care floors, and we're seeing they're getting pressure from the people living there, because obviously if they moved in 3, 4, 5 years ago, their care requirements are increasing. So we're seeing a lot of additional care being available in the traditional retirement homes. That's Matt Del Vecchio from Lianas Senior Transition Services, and he's sharing some the trends in senior living. I want to know what key questions we should be asking when visiting a potential retirement home. And we are talking to Matt about some eye-opening trends in the senior living industry. We also want to hear from anyone who has a question about retirement homes or seniors residences. So you can call us or text in 514-790-0800. Text 514-800. The texts are already coming in, but before we go to the text, I would like to know, Matt, what are some key questions we should be asking when we are visiting a potential retirement home?
Yeah, we actually have a 70-point checklist when we do visits and tours, but I'll just highlight a couple of the more important ones. And I would have to start with making sure they have the proper care levels and what we would call continuum of care. So understand that you may require more care in 2 or 3 or 5 years from now. So you want to try to find a place that can not only address your needs today, but also tomorrow. Culture and environment, obviously, are one very important one. You want to make sure you fit in. And so culture and environment is quite important. And that will tie into the next one. And I'll talk about food. Food and meals is always a biggie. So here's one way to address the culture topic with food. Many of them will just say, come on in for a complimentary lunch. Bring your family members if you want. And we always encourage that. Go there for lunch. One, you'll be able to check out the food and taste it, but you're going to see that environment. You'll be able to get the vibes of where you are. So we always encourage that. Take advantage of a complimentary meal.
So many good suggestions. I'm busy taking notes that I have to actually have to man the board because we are getting in text. Okay, text number 1. What does it cost to live in a retirement home?
Yeah, it's a question I get often. I hate to give a gray answer because it isn't black and white. But what I will do is there's 3 main determining factors that determine costs. One is the actual size of the apartment. They'll range from usually studios to 1 bedrooms up to 2 bedrooms. Do you want meals included or not? Some prefer to have the best of both worlds. No, I want a full kitchen. I'm going to do my meals. I'll go down to the dining room on a Friday night and they buy coupons. Or they might want meals within their lease. And if you need any care services, obviously that's labor involved, and that would also increase the cost. But just to give you an example, a 1-bedroom apartment in a retirement home with no services, you can get that as little as $1,000 a month on some subsidized retirement homes, and you can get up to $3,000 or $4,000 on some large 1-bedrooms. But the average would probably be in the low 2s. And then you also have smaller residences, these family types. You can get in there if you need some care services for in the $300 to $3,500 range per month, and you're getting everything. You're getting your meals, your laundry done, your heat, electricity, and housekeeping. So there is a wide variety of pricing.
That's Matt Del Vecchio, Senior Transition Specialist. His company is called Lianas, and we are hearing about some trends in senior living, and you can call or text if you have a question, 514-790-800 or 514-800. Matt, what about, you mentioned these costs. I look at them, it sounds like, I don't know if it sounds like a lot, a little, or something in between. Are there any government subsidies for retirement homes?
In fact, we just got a text on that right now. So the answer is yes. We're very rare in Quebec, and finally we're getting some Quebec money coming back to us after paying taxes our entire lives. So it's a tax subsidy that is provided if you are over 70 years old and you go to a private retirement home or residence. The government of Quebec will kick in somewhere to the range of 10 to 15% of your monthly rent. It's literally a deposit in your bank account once a month. And so that will help cover some of the costs, and it's one of the major reasons why Quebec, by far in Canada, more people per capita are in retirement residences in Quebec than anywhere else, and partly because the government has helped subsidizing it.
So then, correct me if I'm wrong, if you have a pension and you get that subsidy, this is making it much more manageable, because I guess some people may have that belief that they cannot.
That's right.
They cannot afford. So these things help.
Exactly. And again, specific to Quebec, it's a provincial subsidy.
Okay. Another text that came in. What's the difference between public and private residences?
I get this question a lot, and I'll explain it. Try to keep it as simple as possible. Public residences, this is what we would hear, would be long-term care. We're talking CHSLDs or ressources intermédiaires. So if you can't live on your own, we in Quebec have the option of going into a public long-term care homes. There's no such thing as a public retirement home, independent living or assisted living. In Quebec, though, we do have the option of going private, everything from independent living to assisted living, all the way to long-term care. There's even private long-term care homes. Again, quite unique to Quebec. I also operate in Ontario, and there's no such thing as private long-term care homes. You must go through the public system. So we get that quite a bit. Obviously, from a cost perspective, public long-term care homes are heavily subsidized, but you do have the option of private. And I'll explain. We have a real challenge in our healthcare system, Corey, because here's how it works. If you want to go into a public long-term care home, first of all, you have to get an evaluation. It takes long. And then once you are evaluated, you are able to choose the public long-term care home of your choice. The gap, though, is because it takes time. Anywhere from a year to 2 years to get into this. So what happens is you could possibly go into these transition beds, and you don't have a choice where that transition bed is. And this is which really disrupts families. And so that's why a lot of families will choose to go private during that transition phase before going into a public long-term care home. You have that option here in Quebec.
So I have a question. I think I would like to go explore, for me, for my parents, whatever, a senior residence. I call you. What does that look like? What does that procedure or process look like?
Okay, sure. No, it'd be my pleasure. And again, we're fortunate here because what we do is I've got different Lianas senior advisors that would sit down with the family. We do assessments. We create a profile, and we want to narrow down the best options. Believe it or not, just in Greater Montreal, there's well over 500 retirement residences. It's just overwhelming. So our job is to make sure to try to narrow it down to the top 2 or 3 or 4 choices for you. And we'll organize the tours. We accompany the families on these tours. We go over the 70-point checklist. And hopefully at the end of it, you're more informed, more educated, and able to make that decision for the family. And no charge for these services because
That's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah. And so what happens is our revenue comes from the seniors' residences in the form of a referral fee. And so it's very similar to how a mortgage broker or travel agent would work. So we're not like those lawyers or accountants charging those hourly fees. And it really is just an extension of your family and trying to help out and under what are usually some difficult times sometimes.
Without question, because I was going to ask you, what in an ideal world, someone is saying, I think it's time. Yes, I'm going to do this. But I imagine you get these cases where people call in a crisis, in the crunch of now we have to.
Yeah, exactly. We try to promote being proactive, but the reality is there's a lot of crisis situations. Might be a slip or a fall and you're hospitalized and the doctor's saying you can't go back home and we need some help. All the way to, you know what, we are being proactive. We're looking for something in the spring. We've worked hard our whole lives. The real estate market's been hot. Let's cash in on our home and let's get into a nice retirement home. So everything from that all the way to crisis mode.
Well, thank you so much, Matt Del Vecchio, for sharing with us all of this incredible advice about how to do this and what's involved in even understanding the process of making that transition to a senior living environment. Matt, how do people get a hold of you?
Probably the best way is to go to the website. It's called lianasservices.com, and Lianas is Lianas. That's just an acronym of our children's names, Lisa, Anthony, and Excel. So lianasservices.com would be the best way. Or you can call 514-622-8074.
Thank you so much, Matt, for sharing your words of wisdom.
You.
Matt Del Vecchio, Lianas Senior Transition Services. Let me let you know that next week on Life Unrehearsed, truly inspiring story about a 4-year-old who has managed to survive cancer. And we're going to talk about how their family managed to get through that. We're also going to have caregiving specialist Stephanie Erickson on how to plan well for aging.